Okay, let's get started. So this month's homework was all about expression. So we've done a lot of rendering. We've done a lot of work on looking at what it means to render a face completely. But a face isn't a static thing. A face does not just if you imagine the face as something that can never animate, you will never animate it in your work. And animation doesn't actually require a full-on frame by frame. It has to look like it can animate, that it is not inanimate. And a lot of the times when we paint portraits, we tend to paint very stiff, boring looking faces, and then we infer the expression onto it. So we make it seem like there is expression because of how we dress it up, or there probably is zero expression to someone who's never seen the painting before, but to us there is a lot of expression because we imagine that there is expression there, and so we've inferred it on. So that the key with expression is it actually has to be there. Expression can't be cheated in or faked. It actually has to be there. And for you to understand expression is to understand muscle structure in the face. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to go in and memorize every single muscle. That's something that I actively try to discourage all the time with my students. I try to make them not waste time memorizing medical diagrams of the face. It really doesn't require you to be like a professional, like a doctor or someone who practices what it means to understand all these muscles and their placement. You don't actually have to do that for you to know that a face can move, because we see faces move all the time. So the missing factor isn't that you haven't memorized faces, that you're not observing the faces that move every day around you. And so when you really look at faces and you remove you fragment one section away, you get rid of one aspect of the face, you tend to, you realize the importance of whatever's left behind. If you get rid of the most essential part of a portrait, so in general, in theory, you only realize something's importance when you fragment them, and that's why I try to fragment the learning process as much as possible. So when it comes to expressions, the very, very first thing that I do in that fragmenting process and separating units from each other, analyzing them, and then combining them again starts with the eyebrows. So when we look at the eyebrows, so let's get rid of all of these eyebrows. I'm just going to start with this piece here. Thank you to everyone who's completed it. Thank you for everyone following the rules of the homework. I did want them side by side, but this is acceptable as well. But if we get rid of the eyebrows, if we just go in and get rid of them all, you'll see exactly how much the eyebrow does for the face. Without it, we really don't have much. Actually, I'm not going to use lighten because there are other outliners here. So when it comes to expression, your major tool, the most important carrier of the expression, is the eyebrow, because pretty much out of all other than the mouth, and the mouth is for eating and for speaking, we don't really count it as singularly for expression. But eyebrows, what do they do function-wise, other than cause a little bit of shade for the eye? But without the eyebrows, really, we don't have a lot of expression. It's weird when you think about it. It's like not medically, but anatomically, the eyebrows are really, really good for expression. It's like they were designed for that purpose. Whereas the mouth can express, but it can also eat and speak. The eyebrows seem to be specifically for that. When we get rid of the eyebrows, and I'm just doing this over here, you can see that a lot of the familiarity is gone in the face. And we've talked about the villain face before, how villain should be sickly or unfamiliar, and that's kind of how you create that mystery factor, or that unsafe, or that unwelcome kind of unfamiliar face, and that's how you create a villain. So when we get rid of the eyebrow, we're getting rid of a lot of the familiarity, and familiarity comes with vulnerability, and vulnerability comes with expression, being able to move around. A still face is an uncanny face. It makes no sense that it's constantly that neutral. In fact, I'm going to talk a lot about what horror does with expression in horror movies. And all that, that whole genre, that when you get rid of the eyebrows, not only do you create like a sickly feeling, but you give the face this really, really uncanny neutrality. And even sometimes with the eyebrow, students pull off that uncanny neutral face that is just so inhuman. So remember that having expressions creates a familiarity, creates the human factor, adds vulnerability, makes the face a lot more accessible to the audience. So that's accessible to the audience. That's something that I cover a lot. It's something that I talk about a lot. Exactly, Charlize Theron in Monster, exactly. They dehumanized her by getting rid of her eyebrows, even though the original character they based it on, the person they based it on, it's nonfiction, that she did have a pretty, I don't know, set of eyebrows. You still feel like you're looking at an actual monster, something unfamiliar and essentially a villain. And that's how they do all this. So when you get rid of the eyebrows, I want you to see that though you can pull off a lot of expression with just the face, without the eyebrows, with the eyebrows, you are completing the entire human factor in all of this. And remember that if you are attempting a portrait of any kind of character that is a villain, that it does not have their eyebrows, you have to exaggerate expression everywhere else. When you remove the eyebrow, the responsibility for expression is inherited by the rest of the features. Another really big thing with expression, and I'll go through all of these in critique and then extend the lesson through critique, but I'll stay focused on this piece, is that expressions represent thought. So when you are drawing an expression, if you apply a thought to it, so she's angry, why is she angry? Essentially, what has caused the anger? So when you think about it as a source, give it a narrative, give it a story, and adding narrative has always been like the steroids of a really, really well-rendered painting or a character design or an expression or an entire landscape or environment. It's just like a massive catalyst for the success, a massive boost. Or like some sort of performance enhancer. As long as there's a story behind it, you know what to channel. So you have to think about the story. Why is she having this expression? Because if you think about it, like right now I've added the expression that, I don't know, she found her guy cheating or something. I'm thinking more along, I'm not so worried about looking pretty while I'm angry. I'm going to go straight for the angry. And so when we do that, we get wrinkles. And when you distort the face to a point where the anger has distorted the face, we tend to borrow from age signature. So if you have to create a face that is more angry, like the cry of war or screaming or something like that, you have to apply some of the uglying factors, the factors that really separate beauty from youth, beauty and youth from age and ugliness. And don't worry, I'm using the word ugly. I don't actually mean that people who are old are ugly, but when we talk about art and we're talking about beauty standards, we have to borrow from some really, really boring ideals, but that's how we build tropes. So ugly at this point is a tool, a word that is being used as a tool to describe one end of the spectrum. Okay, so we've exaggerated the wrinkling and the creasing in the eyebrows. We've added this little bit. She's lifting one lip all the way up. I'm not sure why one of the lips is completely thinned out, showing the teeth. I don't think the lip, unless it was cut, would really do that. Not much of the teeth is required, are required here, so. Is required, are required? I really don't, I can't even right now. Sorry for my stuffy voice, by the way. So I'm just applying that thickness back to the lips. I'm going to apply some radial shading so the lips look like they're emerging from that shadow beneath them. It's just some side adjustments. And I've lifted the lip upward, and that's explained why some of the nostril is moved up. Also, the nostril itself has moved up and pushed the cheek up a little bit. One eye should be, I think it is, I think you got it right. One eye is more squinted than the other. A squinted eye is a stretched eye. An open eye is a relaxed eye. That means it has a bit more shadow to it. So we would get rid of that little shadow because it's gone on top of the ball of the eye. And so right there we have a bit more of an intense expression. Her mouth is a little open. When you open your mouth, you tend to hollow out your cheeks, and you end up having a bit more of a deep shadow on either side of the cheek. So now the expression feels a little bit more complete. I would go to the extent of using the full power of the eyebrows. Eyebrows can move up and down, side to side. They can move on the inner anchors or the actual arc anchors. They can move all together as one unit. You can raise one eyebrow, you can lessen the other, lower the other. You can intensify one, you can relax the other. So try to try to become flexible and aware of all of these motions, and then see how much of them you're using. It scares me thinking that a student doesn't understand all of these possibilities, and the reason why they're painting a stiff face is because they don't know that that might be the only options they have, up and down, and then one that's either like angry or not angry is pretty much what students think about when they think about expression in the eyebrows. They don't realize that every emotion involves the eyebrows a little bit. So I want to make sure that thoroughly you guys are aware of all of the pivots, all of the axes of motion for the eyebrows. So one of them is being completely lowered on top of the eye, causing a hood. This is a very awesome one to use, because lowering the eyebrow is something that removes from the beauty, again, one more time, because the separation between a male and female is that the eyebrows for male are much lower, much heavier, the bone structure itself. And so we want to do that. When you are creating an angry character, you don't want them to look like an angry princess. You want them to actually engage in that rage that they have. And that rage does not have a stage for beauty. It kind of completely removes the beauty. And so because we lowered the eyebrow, now there is more shadow. A shadowed eye is an angry eye, is not accessible to the audience, scaring the audience. Someone who's angry tends to shadow all of their eye under their eyebrows and lose a lot of the beauty. Be careful with the Jafar eyebrows, I call them. Even though women are supposed to have a very strong arc, I would it kind of adds like an intelligent evil beauty. I'm not sure if you guys know what I mean, but like an intelligent evil is something to do with, one eyebrow being very high, kind of thinking. So we don't want to make it look like she's in desperation, because that's when we lower the inside higher than the outside. So that's when we have that desperation, the ugly criers. We're all ugly criers. But we don't want to add that inquisitive shape to the eyebrows, because you see, when we have one that's higher, we tend to have an inquisitive kind of a rage, like what? But when we lower both a little bit, it's just straight up rage, kind of like anger. Another really great tool to use in expressing rage is just the fact that shock. There's shock in rage, and that's why I say there is a lot of thought behind the expression. So no one is just angry. Why are they angry? Did they discover information that kind of just shook their idea of reality? Did they realize that something they've never realized before, they suddenly realize it for the first time? So they're in shock as well as rage. Emotions are multiple. You don't just have one emotion. So you try to represent all of them at the same time, or as they are, as required by the narrative. So when we open up the eye just a little bit, we raise the eyelid, we're representing a sense of shock. Another really massive tool to use for expression and executing a really believable expression is the focus in the eyeballs. So making sure that the eyeballs are actually looking at a destination. I'm not sure, I've never been enraged but kind of not looking at something. When you're angry, you're looking at something. There's something that you're looking at. Even if you're focused and you're alone in a room and you just had an enraging realization, like, what, that motherfucker didn't tip me. I don't know, something like that. You tend to kind of look at one object specifically while you're lost in your enraging thought, and that's pretty much it. Like it's there's always going to be something you're looking at that is the target of your rage. Even if it's an empty room, you're going to try to find a corner or something to look at while you are lost in your enraging thoughts. So when you are, shocked, when you're angry, when you're just realize something, you tend to look down. You tend to, when you're thinking, you tend to look down. When you're thinking in your head, you tend to look up. There's this wonderful channel that on YouTube that it's a woman. She just gets a video of someone, and she starts breaking down their emotions through their body language. It's really wonderful to watch if you are interested in taking that kind of route for a really intensive kind of portraiture or character design or storytelling. But she really explains what the eyes do when they are looking down. So see how it feels like she just had a serious realization. I unshadowed her eyes at the top. There's more visibility on the pupil, and the iris isn't hidden under any lashes. So this makes her a little bit more shocked. The eyebrows have been lowered. This expression has become so much more magnified, multidimensional. and we have to keep adding to it. We have to keep thinking about it. What's the story? What is the thought that's being represented? And then how is the eye focus going to benefit that? So if she was, I'm going to have to do a bit of extensive editing now to pull this off, but I do want to just show you the power of the focus in the eye, what it does to the expression. So we've got this set of eyes. She looks like she's lost in thought. She realized someone didn't tip her, or someone just completely dissed her and she didn't realize it in the moment, then she realizes it later on. I don't know what it could be, but it's good to kind of think of that. It's ridiculous to think of it, but it makes all the difference in your work. When we are enraged and are looking at something, the target is in our kind of like line of sight, we tend to focus on that thing. And so we have to kind of open up her eyes just a little bit more. So let me open them up just a little bit more. I'm actually going to duplicate this layer, merge down. My friend taught me about merging shortcuts, but I'm so bad with shortcuts. So I'm going to open up the eyes a little bit more. And that'll kind of create a nice bed for me to add the pupils. And then I'm going to add them kind of looking at something nearby. So this is some intense rage. When you're looking at something specifically. And then if you compare it to where we had it before, if you lower them, actually, let's lower them first. And let's see what happens when we lower them and have more and more white above the pupil. Remember that. That's another tool. So we're talking about eye focus as tools, eyebrows as tools, and the space above the eye, above the pupil and the iris as tools. Look at that. The rage just gets more and more intense, and then she's slowly starting to, hey, that son of a bitch didn't tip me. Okay, so it's like, we're looking at something, the eyes are still crossed, but there's so much space of white under the eyes. So this is what I mean by expression as a narrative of some kind, of a story, so an animated story. So the animation is a very, very big deal, because if you think about it as a slow progression and then you chose the best shot to take, that's how you pull off the most believable expressions, the most human expressions. Then we get into the head tilt. So head tilt is a wonderful way to express. Everyone forgets about the head tilt. I love how you didn't forget about it here. The head tilt is, yeah, exactly, tilting the head down. I was just getting to that. Yes, exactly. So tilting the head down and looking up at someone. So let's move these eyes back. Tilting the head down, the chin really is what it means. You just tuck the chin into your neck and then you look up. And it's just going to look more and more and more scary each time they kind of do that. So just like that. So the head tilt, the fact that you use it here is wonderful, but remember that the head can also have such a massive range of motion. So when someone is angry and tilting their head backward, that's kind of an angry plus scheming. An angry plus about to make a really bad choice. Angry, like the expression that Joffrey had before he beheaded Ned Stark. Let's just talk about that. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler for you. It's like 10 years too late. But when he does that, the kind of expression I would see him doing is something like this. Head tilted back, exactly the same eyebrows, but a little smile. So you're representing the malice, you're representing the shock at what he's doing. He probably didn't believe he was doing that himself. He probably didn't even believe it was possible to behead Ned Stark. But then at that point, he felt the power, he was enraged, and hence, that's the narrative. That's the story background that we're talking about. You have to think about it as a writer. I've always talked about it as think about things as a writer as much as possible. It makes you so powerful as an artist because there's really no avenue that you haven't considered two-dimensionally in writing and three-dimensionally as a render, and how they reflect each other. But the head tilt is a very, very big deal. And it's scary for a student to tilt a head because it means that they have to kind of remove one of the major light spots on the face, which is the chin. So they have to, oopsie, wrong brush. So they're going to have to like dim this a little bit and then kind of minimize this little shadow right over here. And then raise the neckline a little bit as well. Oopsie. Merge down. And they're kind of just tilting the head ever so slightly and tucking the neck in. There's also the major perspective aspect, so we wouldn't really be seeing much of the nostrils. We'd be seeing a lot more of the eyebrows underneath. We'd be seeing a lot more of the top of the head. So it would be a full-on tilt. I'm not even sure this is possible. Sometimes I try it. Students think that this is a way to do it. It's not. You actually have to draw the perspective. There's no Photoshop cheat. But this kind of behaves almost like a cheat. It's really, really horrible. But it kind of takes care of the head size at least. This is not the way to do perspective. I know you're watching me do it, but this is not acceptable. And then I would get rid of the nostril. This is just because I have to paint over and pretty quickly for, for class, but you have to draw in your perspective. There's no cheat for it. And then I would, oh, this one isn't accurate. Okay, and so that head is kind of tilted, Please remember, this is not an acceptable way to apply perspective, but it definitely added some perspective to what we're doing. And let's talk about the eye squint here. It's starting to read a little bit as disgust. So this could be a prisoner looking at a prison warden. This could be, any story, really. Let's just think about something. This could be someone who just realized something. This could be someone just accused suddenly of a most terrible kind of treason. This could be someone who is defending someone at the same time as ready to attack. This is defensive as well as offensive. There's so much going on, so many more dimensions applied because we weren't afraid to get our hands dirty. We weren't afraid to get ugly. So write that back to me. Don't be scared to get ugly, because ugliness is a beautiful way to distort a face, but still maintain the beauty, like the factors of ugly. Ugly as, remember, ugly as a tool, as one end of the spectrum. So that means beauty standard is destroyed. That means eye size is kind of lessened because the eyebrows fall really heavily on the eyes, so the eyes look less big, therefore decreasing beauty into ugly. And yeah, essentially, what you don't want to do is try to constantly make the girl look pretty in her many expressions. It doesn't feel human that way. We don't always look the best. There are some expressions that are horrifying, that are based off of just straight up the thought takes over the face. The face no longer represses the thought. So expressions like this, she feels like she's repressing some thought. So if we see it as a spectrum, this is major repression, so thought repression, and then no repression. There's no more repression. What you're thinking is what we see. So what we think versus what the audience sees. All right, so this is a very big one. Goes back to the eye focus, whereas you're looking at something that you are thinking about. So when you are enraged, so rage means target. And when someone is angry, they are looking at the eye. They're no longer covert. They're no longer sneaky about it the way women can get really sneaky when they have trauma. No, they'll look directly at who's pissing them off and they'll talk to them. It's no longer some sort of half kind of revealed, half repressed, like manipulative type of repression of emotions and thought. Being a hypocrite, being two-faced, all that kind of stuff is something we'd say for the villain, for the someone who doesn't reveal how they're really feeling. And to connect all this to something that we're used to seeing is to think about actors. So actors really, really mess around with this, with all of this stuff. How do actors pull off so much of the script, so much of what they're responsible for expressing? So imagine a very, very evil advisor to the king. He is 100% always trying to get the king killed, and somehow he discovers something that he should not have overheard, but he wants to celebrate it, but he has to repress that. How does an actor represent all of that? And again, it comes through expression by showing the immediate expansion of the pupils, not the pupils, the eyelids, revealing the pupil, checking themselves really quickly. Oh shit, did I just reveal too much of my inner emotions? And closing up again, lowering the eyebrows. Maybe one eyebrow is really high, one is low because they're inquisitive, they're thinking about the information they just overheard. And that's it. That's really all that goes into it. So the narrative, finding your tools and knowing how much motion they have, understanding all the motion your eyebrow can offer you, all the motion a nose can offer you, a mouth can offer, a head tilt can offer, eye focus can offer, and making sure you're using all of them. And you'll know how to use them. The question is probably, okay, Istebrak, I've become very aware of all of these. How do I use them? There's no way you could ever use them if you didn't have a story backdrop that kind of told you and kind of set the stage, kind of directed you the way a movie director would. The story directs you into shaping your actors the way you need them to be. So if someone had just messed her, like imagine this as an illustration. So this girl right now, I'm seeing an illustration. She's messing with some dark powers. Someone just caught her. Her hand is on this little pedestal. There's a really, really beautiful relic that she wasn't supposed to touch. And someone just discovered her. She turned around really quickly. You can show the motion in the hair the way she turned around. You can tell that her hand is starting to get corrupted because she touched the magic or something like that. And this is how she's looking at the person who discovered her. You know, no more will I be whatever. I will use this power the way I want to. And you can show the madness in her hair. You can show the madness on her face. And that would be a wonderful way to utilize this specific expression we just built together. So remember that there's a lot of expression that is realistic, and there's a lot of expression that is cartoony. So if you guys remember the universal signs of, any kind of emotion, an expression is always equated as emotion. So write that back. Expression is emotion. So there's so many different kinds of expressions that we have. The problem is these are very, very minimalist. They're very cartoony. Very easily, and I'm sure you guys have discovered, this can be seen as madness. But wait, the original expression was supposed to be happy. So there's the cartoony version, and then there's the realistic version. So this kind of face, anyone who has a face like this in public is considered mad. How about this? This one can be sad, cartoony, which is more universal. Okay, and then there is the realism, which isn't so universal, it's very particular. And you guys should be writing all of this down. So this one, which is sad, can also be deep in thought. I'm not sure how long the lag is, but what other expressions can you see in this face that isn't sad? Expression is emotion. Good. I think the lag is really, really high. So I'm not sure if you guys will be able to respond on time. But what other emotions can you guys attach that are realistic and particular emotions to this face right here? Don't be scared to get ugly as fuck. Exactly. Yes, you can master ears. It's okay about ears. A lot of people ask me about ears, but I say that the less rendered they are, the more kind of not a direct role they're painting. Disappointed. Okay, disappointed. Sorry about my writing. I hope you understand what I'm doing here. Bored. Very nice. Very, very nice. Very realistic. I like this one. Bored. Worry. Worry and disappointment tend to be from the same area, which is sad. But I understand that the specificity applied. So it's not just sad, it's why they're sad. Why are they sad? Oh, disgust. Very, very good. Disgust. Very nice one. Confused. So do you understand? So I don't even know what I just wrote. Contrast. Confused. So do you guys see the amount of writing, how writing affects what we're looking at? And if you just apply just a little bit, you'll kind of get the worry, even without without too much of the eyebrow. This can be someone waiting. This can be deep in thought if you just maybe lower one eyebrow just a little bit, and you'll show the deepened thought. Just a little bit. Look, it can still be considered worry, but also deepened thought. So this is the realistic depiction of emotion and expression versus the universal one. So don't be one of these. Don't always look to these for expressing an emotion, because emotions are very complicated, multi-layered. If you understand this spectrum, you've probably never seen it mapped out before, and this probably is an aha moment for you. But this is something you're versed in because you talk to people every day. So I just asked you, what do you guys see from here? These are your answers. So this means you already have a built-in codex, I guess, of what emotion can do and what you yourself have experienced in emotion. So remember that there's a lot more to it than just a couple of eyebrow shifts, and you get an emotion. So here, she can be at the same time a disgusted. I can see disgusted in this. This can be a very deep disgusted, not an outward, kind of a repressed disgust. So if you add repressed to the beginning of every single one of these, so repressed disgust, repressed confusion. This really feels like repressed confusion for me. This can be repressed disappointment. So repressed, again, another tool. So we've talked about the eyebrows as a tool, head tilt as a tool. We've talked about the pupil focus as a tool. We've talked about how narrative and the acting behind it is a very big aspect of deciding what kind of expression am I doing, how much am I manipulating the features. And then repressed can be another unit, another tool that you're adding, another condition that you're adding on top. All of these are conditions you can add to a neutral face. And there's so much you can read out of a neutral face. I'm a big fan of neutral expression. I'm a big fan of confused expression, but subtlety applied to it. So subtlety is another, there's repression, which is kind of like a unit of subtlety. Subtlety, I don't know what I'm writing. So there's that. I think there's another T in there. And so subtlety can be in, it's one end of the spectrum. The opposite subtlety means repressed thought. So deep thought usually reflects a lot of thought. But you can't really continue thinking while you're explosive. So this is the unit that I use. This is the symbol that I use for an open gesture. An open gesture is a gesture that is explosive. It is a gesture that is someone who is fighting, who is attacking, who is jumping, who is receiving, who is running across the field, who is batting a badminton racket, who is, or whatever it's called, or someone who just caught a ball, someone who has some kind of burst of energy near or in them that has happened, that has made the body completely asymmetrical, that has caused the body to lose balance, that has caused the body to, in a moment of energy explosion, which will probably surely expend all your energy, leaving you very tired at the end of the day, which is sports, it will make them either suspended in space for a moment or distort all the fat and muscle on their body. If you've ever seen a baseball batter, not a baseball batter, what are they called? The thrower, the catcher, the pitcher. Have you seen what happens to their arms in slow-mo? So those who wear short sleeves, when they throw the ball, the fat in the body, especially when someone jumps and lands again, the fat and muscles on the thighs, they go through so much distortion and vibration because of the motion. So that's all a sign of an open gesture. If the body is going through that, some energy has exploded through. So when someone is in an expression like this, so we just equate this as an expression, there's very little thought left. It's just action. So this is more meditation, and then there's action. So there's the difference between an active gesture, which we can also say as an active expression. So an active expression would be someone who is ready to act. There's no more thoughts in here. It's just all just ready to explode. Something's ready to come out. There's no more thinking. Thinking is done. Now is the time for action. And then these are all very meditative kind of expressions where there is a lot of thought. This one can be action. This one is confusion, so there wouldn't be any thought left in there. This one also, no thought in there. This is a reaction. This is active. So there's no thought. You just reacted to something that has happened externally. If you were thinking, if the person was thinking, The way we make it retrospective, or what's the term, introspective, if we make it just a little bit more confused, we can, and lowering the eyes, we can add that thinking quality. So not only is she shocked, but she was shocked by something that she just realized. So you see what an eye can do, what the eye focus can do? So lowering the eye focus, there's no target, but we added a target earlier. Earlier there was a target. She was looking at someone, she just reacted to them. But when we lower the eyes, we've added the shock without the target, which means she was thinking. And look at all that narrative. Look at how much storytelling power we just engaged in by saying at one point she was in a room, she was thinking. We've suddenly added so much space around the character. We've added so much life around the character. So now she's just shocked, but she's kind of looking at something while she's being, you can lower it even more. You can decrease the focus in the eyes. So if she is shocked, what will happen? She won't be looking at something. She may be looking at some random object in her room. But if we were to shift the eyes just a little bit and not allow that focus, so before, after, we remove that, kind of add that derp. I call it derp. It just means that the eyes aren't sharply focused inward. And they're kind of not really looking at any object. She's kind of lost in her own thoughts. She's like, what? And again, we're adding more space around her. Okay, so shock can be a little bit more like that. Shock can be looking at something while you're shocked. And then shock can be just what we had before, which is looking at someone and is a little bit shocked. Okay, so many dimensions between this shocked, and this one. Do you see that? Make sure you are aware that you can do all this. A student that is not aware of their tools won't use them. Write that down. So if you are not aware of the potential for the read that you can get out of being aware of all of these, at no point are you going to become aware. Maybe at one, down the line, one epiphany a year. That used to be me. I used to have one epiphany a year. But when you start to really study the human face, study how much you can read out of it, challenge yourself to try to read more expression, you really enter this completely different, just a completely different way of seeing a person's face. You end up being more attentive to human emotion. You end up being a little bit more aware of what you're looking at. So actually, I don't need to do any of that. I just have to delete all this. So actors, when they tap into the difference between a cartoony expression and a real expression, look at the difference between, let's choose one really, really thought-intensive movie. The most recent Jane Eyre adaptation, and let's compare the expressions there with Marvel, with the first Avengers movie. The expressions in that movie are so cartoony. The actors don't have to work too hard to represent what they're referring to. I can't bring up any pictures for the copyright reasons. I'm not sure if I'm allowed, but do look them up as I'm speaking now, the difference between the Jane Eyre actors, so Michael Fassbender and that girl with the really long Russian name, and Marvel characters as they are, in their action poses and talking to each other and whatever in the first Avengers movie. So that's for homework. Watch those two movies and compare the acting, and you'll see completely two different types of paintings. One of them is more cartoony, action, anime influenced. There is a little bit more to do with external expression versus retrospective or deep thought or meditative expression. Okay, so the repression, all of that stuff, I do want to see you guys submit some notes. I want to see you guys explore some more, after this critique hour. I want you guys to go back and explore a higher dimension of expression. Try to add another new dimension. So this person is sad, but I kind of see them as also unimpressed. So if there is a way to apply the sadness to have a little bit more sorrow to it. So change sorrow, change sadness to sorrow, change anger to rage, change confusion to completely dumbfounded. Explore how far you can stretch this expression, these tools, and you'll be able to find a lot more of a strength to your portraits. You'll be able to tell a lot more sharp a story. Any questions at all about any of this? So I think the shadows here under the eyebrow a little bit too dark, unless she painted them in, because she raised her eyebrow to be above the bone. The eyebrow can be above the eyebrow bone. Bones don't move, the skin does. So that means that there will be light under the eyebrow because she raised it above the hill the eyebrow once sat on. Okay, so that was too much shadow down there. And I'm just going to ease up on the shadow everywhere else. So there's a lot of brightness. The light environment isn't really allowing that much shadow. The eyebrows changed here. Make sure that a lot of likeness goes into eyebrows. So if you guys neglect to keep the eyebrows the same through all your paintings, you won't be really going into having a more consistent turnaround or animating. You really will have a different face each time. You won't have that accuracy or that strength in your portfolio if the face changes every time you rotate it. One big thing I wanted to mention is that you guys, some of you didn't do this. Some of you didn't do a 14-day challenge exploration of the portrait. Some of you copied your faces exactly. So I didn't want to say no to that because I thought, okay, they're doing another study. It's just another study. It's good. They're still trying the expressions. But ideally, I did not. It looked very, for some of these, they look very, very photorealism, which is really good because you actually pushed yourself to render that far. But it's not so much you guys exploring the expression, it's you guys copying an expression already there. So references, I would have liked to see at least 3 references for happy, 3 different references for sad, multiple references, not just one snapshot of you referencing your face, pulling off what you think is happy or what you think is sad. Though it's still a valid expression study, I would have liked for you guys to become a little bit more flexible with your with the way you executed the study. So if you do go back, edit them like they are not your faces, because you will attempt to keep the ugly away. But some of you really did push as far as possible. So this one here really, really did explore. I love how right here, the wideness of the nose, her nose isn't wide at all, but the wideness is added when you see this face. And because it's referenced off a realistic face, you do get a benefit from that, from having taken the photorealism route, because you get the realistic expression, not the cartoony expression. So if you do one with minimal expression, with minimal references, you tend to rely on the universal basic expressions that are cartoony. And when you push into more realistic references, you do pull from the other stuff. So this is neutral. It can also mean angry. It can also mean sad. Do you see how we can read so much out of this? This one can be, I hate you in the eyes, but I'm really, really happy in the mouth. This one can be, it's very expressive, it's external, there isn't much thought in there. If there is, it's more like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Or, oh gosh, this lemon is so sour. And that's really just, the really, really 2 major ones that I'm reading out of this one. This one I can read as sad, also in the middle of talking. So someone can be just talking about something that they feel strongly about because the inner part of the eyebrow has shifted up. That expresses some kind of sorrow. This can be very, very sad. This can be sad, but also a little bit happy. Also a little bit like, what the heck are you doing? That's kind of what I'm reading. It's a very, very cute girl. And then we have this one, which is angry. It can also mean, it can be hangry as well. But this is another one of those external ones where there isn't much thought. This one can be bored as well. If you do try to add thought to it, if you think about it, and we can add the thought by not allowing the reference to act, because we're not all very good actors, and this is why I didn't want you guys to use your own faces, because you will be acting. A real expression is one that is acted very well. It's not acting anymore, it's real human influence. So the fact that you made the mouths, human mouths don't do this when they're sad. This is something we pretend that we're doing. This is something that we force. This is something that we don't really do when we're naturally feeling sad. So natural expression isn't what we do when we're acting, and very badly at that. So that's why I want to make sure you guys aren't referencing your faces too much, because an actor would know not to try the sad face. Nah, that's the number one rule about acting. Don't actually do the sad mouth. So someone who is angry, their lips they lose control of what their lips are doing. Their eyebrows can show a little desperation and rage on one eyebrow. Emotion and rage and heavy emotion is very asymmetrical. So write that down. And there can be one side that is up a little bit higher, and the mouth can be a bit bigger on one side. So you no longer have just, no, I'm really sad. And this is kind of like what kids do when they're angry. They pretend they have the sad face because that's what they learned in their language system. But when a kid really is sad, when they really did get told, told off, they really do look like a little bit less like sad and more like bored rage. Combining these two words together is how you get a more advanced expression. So be careful not to take references off yourself. We're all bad actors. We want to capture real emotion. You can do that with or without reference study. I'll always say have a good balance between reference and no reference. That's always, the best option out of all of this is having a pattern between reference study and no reference study. So you know how to work outside of depending on a reference, as well as knowing how to read your reference and practicing with references. If I draw my face, it's impossible to keep the ugly away. Don't say that. It reminds me of a bit of the then perish Obama meme. I've never heard that meme before. I've never heard of it. So I'm going to go through the rest. So these tend to be a little bit uncanny. These are getting to be a little bit uncanny. Some of these are basically because there was such a big, kind of like a massive spectrum of expressions to explore through a face that started off as neutral, which is very nice, but as you applied expressions, it's starting to look more and more like an older man instead of a young child. That is very beautiful. So the older man effect is what we get when we distance the mouth from the nose. So not only did you have to add expression, but you had a child, which is max beauty. Remember, a child is max beauty. As beautiful as we can get, that a child is more beautiful in the standards. So you're always in danger of making a young child look like an old man. So we do that by distancing the nose from the mouth. So now the chin is a bit too far. It's going to look a little bit like the ghost from Ghostbusters. So I'm going to lower this so the chin is a little bit less strong. And we're starting to get the child back. So I'll show you the before and after. So you can see. Be careful. This is what I mean when I mean references can be tricky. Be careful not to do this. So what did I do? Did I do this right? I think I did, yeah. Okay, so the mouth got to be in the same spot, even though I moved it up, but I moved the face back down. Okay, and then another thing is the kind of the jowls that you've added as a form of pigmentation. So you can lower the values a little bit. And I don't know what your reference looked like, but from your rendered version, what we're reading, based off the read of something painted versus a photograph gets away with everything. It's a photograph. But a painting, every choice that we make is magnified. So this may have been a simple shadow in your photograph, but to us, it's starting to read as a beard. Because that's just how our brains work. We treat photographs very differently from paintings. Paintings get away with less. Photographs, of course, get away with more. This one is good. Be careful here. These are very, very specific expressions. This one is good because the eyebrows are distorted. So this one can be bored. This one is a great study after we got rid of the little pieces here. This one can be angry. This one can be sad as well if you think about it. This is sad too, but it feels more like a sad, almost ready to cry. So not so sad as an emotion of sorrow, but kind of like bored. I really want to go outside. You're not letting me go outside. It's not a sad. It's more of a like, like a child's incoming tantrum kind of face. And again, be careful with the shadows down here. This one, another example of how dangerous it can be to allow the mouth to lower too low. That when a mouth smiles, it goes up. It travels vertically. Write that down, please. So remember, when a mouth smiles, it's stretching the lips. The lips stretched move upward. When you smile, your nose is always closer to your mouth, or your mouth moves up close to your nose. Okay. And then again, with this expression, we are doing the mouth that is a little bit downward. It's more like a kind of fake sad. This one feels more natural because we're doing less with the mouth and doing more with the eyebrows. It's bad. That's kind of what child actors do. They pretend the emotion. They don't. It's just pretend time. Child actors, the good ones at least don't do this, but the bad child actors always do this. They pretend it's pretending. It's not acting, and that's how you get a child to act, by making them pretend. Yes, a mouth goes up. When it smiles, it goes up. So be careful not to get that, really, really bad influence of cartoony expressions layered on top of realistic references by having the character or the reference act. Be good at determining whether or not your reference is a good actor. And do that comparison between the actors from the Jane Eyre movie, the latest one with Michael Fassbender, and the first Avengers movie. Compare the way they express emotion there. It's very, very different type of storytelling. Some are more universal, some are more internal, and be careful not to apply, unless it's a very, very deep story, careful not to allow children to express too much of a deep thought. Becomes, if you think about it, I think that the movie is called The Others, with Nicole Kidman. It's a horror movie, but it has children in it. It's very, very scary. It has a big twist at the end. But the way the children expressed in there, it was not cartoony. But then compare that to an almost equally scary classic like The Shining. The way that child was expressing emotion was hilarious. Also because the child wasn't allowed to know the story. They actually protected him from the story. The actor didn't know what he was acting in. He didn't know he was in The Shining. He was just told, react this way, show me shocked, show me scared. And that's why he kind of had that actorism. Actorism is just the feeling you get off an ingenuine performance, and what the actor is doing. So of course we can't talk about expression without talking about acting. And when you think about what that actor did to express shock versus the shock in the children from the others, again, you're comparing two completely different types of narratives, and you're exploring bad versus good, getting yourself to understand the taste, getting a better taste for acting. And your paintings are actors. So write that down as well. Your paintings are actors. You want to express a more genuine performance. You don't want something cheesy. You don't want something cliche. You don't want something too universal. You don't want something too external. You want a lot of inner thought. And your portraits will speak volumes when you think like this. So again, this one, the problem with this one is that he has puppy dog eyes and he's a male, but your reference had that as well. So this is the kind of the tricky thing. The thing is, you kind of gave him, even though he does have the beauty triangle here. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. So we have the beauty triangle here. It's reinforced and saved when we think about the extension of the jaw. So we go back to square. Whereas you here, you continued that. The jaw no longer saved the beauty triangle from making, by saved I mean saved him from looking like a woman or looking like a child with a beard, or looking like a woman with a beard. Another thing that saved him from that is the nose size. So if this was a caricature, I would exaggerate the nose size. I would exaggerate the lowness of the eyebrows. So for you, you actually kept his eyebrows high. You should have kept them low, because his eyebrows were very straight. So when it comes to a character and a reference and we don't know what to do, he looks very effeminate. Our cartoon version will only look more effeminate. You have to exaggerate the features and kind of go on. No longer autopilot, you kind of have to go in there and edit your reference actually. Because if you're trying to go for a realistic expression, you really won't pull it off borrowing from beauty standards, even though he's very susceptible to them. So I would lower the eyebrows. See what happens when we lower the eyebrows like we did with the first painting? We've lowered them. Just like that. So he looks a little bit more enraged. This one is great. This one he's smiling. I would still go and edit all of these chins. I don't want it to look like a female. This one looks like the puppy dog eyes that the Puss in Boots does from Shrek. It's just that's instantly what I see. Why? Because it's a cartoony children's show which uses external emotions which are cartoony. This immediately is what I read as the viewer. So never blame the viewer for what they're reading. Always look back to the decisions you make, because what the viewer reads is raw. What the viewer reads is what if they're reading the right thing, you did a good job. If they're reading the wrong things, that's something you did, not something they're born with. That's something that they applied. So the fact that I read big puppy dog eyes kind of whimpering is what this is not sad. This is not what the face of a man, maybe if he's about to cry, maybe if he's in some sorrow, he would get something of this. But sadness for a man can sometimes look like this. This can look like sadness. And I want you guys to explore a little bit more. So this is a good place for you to start. I really always encourage you guys to apply your corrections when you can and re-upload. But this time it really counts if you guys edit your work again. These expressions are going to go into your portfolio. They're going to mean very, very big. They're going to speak volumes in your portfolio for potential character design jobs. So if you're exploring expressions that have more of a dimension to them, less cartoony, even if you're applying for something that requires cartoony, you can show them you have an even wider range. So I'm going to make it a requirement to revisit all of your expressions and apply what you've learned today. So this one feels like disgust, shock, rage. I love what you did. You didn't really worry about making her look pretty. You did make her look a little bit more, like, applied the beauty, the wrinkles that destroy the beauty, lowered the eyebrows. You didn't worry too much about the eyebrow crease. This one looks nice. The smile feels a little bit ingenuine. You might want to extend the smile a little bit more, but I like that you use the creases here as well. It's kind of a big smile. The thing is, when we're smiling without using our eyebrows, this is how it teaches me two things. The woman has Botox or she doesn't mean it. So when someone smiles with their eyebrows, they really are smiling for you. When someone smiles without their eyebrows, okay, she's starting to look a little bit creeped out. I'm just trying to raise the eyebrows above the eyes. I'll delete the new eyes. But when someone smiles without their eyebrows, there's thought behind it. So really what you can do is, the less actions the eyebrows do, the more thought inside. You can it's not written in stone, that can change. There are exceptions to that rule, but you can trust it for now. The less actions the eyebrows do, the more thought internally. Okay, so write that down. So I'm going to bring back the old eyes. Oh, shoes. There we go. Okay. And I like the new eyes as well because they had a bit more expression to them. But when I get the old eyes back, I tend to see more of a squint, which means a bigger smile. So when we have more space under here, it really does feel like she's smiling. We always start with the inner eyebrow and move up. Make sure that we don't make her look like she's, it's a cry for pain. Also, it does not seem natural to show all of the teeth. Sometimes a big smile does show all the teeth, absolutely. But by the time these teeth showed, the mouth was really, really wide. Do you understand? So for the mouth lip to be stretched so far, the upper lip to be stretched so far, it means there is a smile that is quite large happening. As for the lower teeth, what do you guys read off lower teeth showing through? When I see lower teeth, I think disgust, like, you know, like that face. But what do you guys see when you see lower teeth in a smile? So the Cupid's bow gets outstretched and loses its shape in a smile. And sometimes we can have asymmetrical smiles to apply a more human feeling. And she does feel like she's not, there's no life in her eyes, so I want to just apply a little bit of kind of like a watery effect. And I want to remind you guys that the brain, sometimes when you're laughing enough, tends to release some tears. We get tears, and the brain reads it as the same intensity as when we cry, because it's so much emotion. It's being burst out like we are when we're crying, but we are laughing instead. So that's why we cry when we laugh. We're not really crying, but we, it's just tears, and that's because of like a massive amount of emotion that's coming through. And that's kind of why we look like we're smiling sometimes when we're crying, because the face kind of distorts around in such a way where our, ugliness comes out again. So compare this expression, which I am going to wrinkle up on one side more because we have that asymmetry. So happiness is a very nice expression to show off. It can be one of the more boring ones because there isn't much thought. And when we want to apply thought, what do we do to the eyebrows? We neutralize them. Kind of sounds like a threat. So there was your smile before. It kind of doesn't seem genuine. Kind of feels like an evil smile, like, I'm going to get you. Or like talking through her teeth. And then there's the one where you have no control of your eyebrows. You're so happy. You're so elated. Your mouth is outstretched as far as it needs to go. When the teeth show and there's no smile to explain it, that's when it looks like disgust. Yeah, pain, exactly. So when you show the lower teeth, you express pain. She kind of looks like she's expressing pain right now, like, oh my God, this tattoo really hurts, or something else. So smiling is a very, very difficult one to pull off if you're being too reserved. You see how it feels like she has thoughts? But here, no thoughts, just happiness. Really, really happy. And that's what actors do. Don't use your eyebrows when you want to show off some thought. Leave your eyebrows out of it. So when we don't use the light in the eyes, actually, we tend to, make it look evil. That's something that, like washed out eyes or milky eyes or shadowed eyes. That's what we do for a villain. We try not to add those anime sparkles to their eyes because we're making them too friendly. And along with their no eyebrows, we're making a very uncanny looking villain. So she has eyebrows, of course, but make sure to have the eye sparkles in there. When you smile, use more eye speculars. When you are angry, use more eye speculars. You're showing an expression of emotion that is bringing forth some tears. So tears are another tool in your arsenal. So I'm going to, what is it again? M? No. Holy God. I'm just going to just flatten the image and save. Okay, so same thing with the actorism, the acting. A lot of these are not really expressions we actually use day to day. This one is beautiful. I love this expression. Happiness, content, feeling very satisfied. There is a bit of thought. There is thought in there. Probably like, why am I taking a picture of myself type of thought. That's the expression I get when I'm taking a selfie. But the smile is genuine. There are real asymmetry to the smile, which is more human and charming. But the eyebrows could have just a little bit more action. So if we were to get these eyebrows, just look at this, and apply them, apply them over here. Do you see how it feels more like a friendly smile than a smile with thought? Do you see that difference? Okay, and then when we apply these eyebrows everywhere else, it'll look like this person is thinking like a fake smile. Like if we brought these eyebrows and projected them on this face. So let's try that. I'm so sorry. I'm like using your face for this experiment. Like, ha ha ha, you're not funny, real funny. You see what I'm saying? Like sarcasm. As sarcasm is thinking. Sarcasm requires thinking. So if we switch the eyebrows. So it's another example of how strong the eyebrows are. This one looks more happy as well, but it can be very sad. It can be like a sad forcing a happy out. Sad can be very, very deep in thought. Sad can be one of those that needs to show off that inner realistic thinking, that human factor. This one looks more like a cartoony expression. So we do get this one and this one don't feel like something you would actually do when you're shocked. So when I'm shocked, my face doesn't look like that, but that's my face can look like this when I'm shocked. But it has to be like a big shock, like someone just crashed into your car. But at the same time, I just told a story, someone just crashed into my car. There's anger mixed in there in the cauldron as well of emotion. And so it doesn't feel realistic that this is the only expression they're feeling, which is why it feels two-dimensional and cartoony. Realistic is multidimensional, which just means there's layers of emotion. This one's good. I feel like I can see this one day, but it's more of a external kind of like display of emotion. It doesn't feel like a genuine how you would actually look when you're confused. So be careful of the acting. I'm not sure if these are expressions you referenced off of him, or that, I think you did. I think these are pretty good. These are pretty good. Remember when the mouth smiles, you actually have to move the mouth upward or else it'll look like an older person. So you might have noticed this one looked a little bit older. And that's just because there was a distance between the nose and the mouth that made him look too old. He does have a distance for his mustache, but it's not that extensive. And then we have this one. These are all looking pretty good. There's no actorism. There's no like, these are real expressions that you went for. This one is a little cartoony. You can tell like he's just, what's the British term for it? Taking a piss? Taking the piss out of something? I don't know. But it's exactly what I need to say right now, that term. I just don't know what it's called. But it doesn't seem like he actually means to agree and is thinking. It's just something that you do sometimes when you're talking to people. You know, you kind of, oh yeah, for sure, yeah. Like something like that. It doesn't feel like that's something he would actually do with his face. This actor, I mean, this specific actor. So be careful when there's ingenuine, kind of like someone on stage or someone answering questions. Sometimes the expressions they pull off are ones that they're very, very self-conscious of. And they tend to look a little bit more like bad acting or universal cartoony expressions. This really feels like his actual smiling face. This feels genuine. The smile is real, the mouth is high, the eyes and the eyebrows all represent little thought. He's just reacting to something nearby. Very, very genuine. This I'm not, it's very pixelated. But this one, yes, it does represent thinking. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Maybe, maybe. This is another maybe. So this is a maybe expression. This can also be a maybe expression. One is fake feeling, one is actual, genuine, human one. So see what I mean? Earlier I was trying to explain that, but this is a good example. And then we have the rage, which you applied. So you can see that the neckline is below the shoulders. That's what we were talking about earlier when we dip the head under and tilt the chin. Another really, really good example of how rage requires that focus, almost animal-like, pouncing forward, eyes focused, eyebrows low, asymmetrical, extreme laugh lines, or just these jowls, and we're kind of having a little bit of either side. So if I were to hide the top and show the mouth, it can be chewing. The mouth does look enraged, but it feels like the top, which is so extremely stressed, isn't matching a complete level of stress, which we do have over here. So this is wide open. There's, nothing reserved, no thoughts left. So I would actually apply an even deeper kind of like wrinkling over here. Showing off these jowls as well. Kind of like really. Okay, so any questions at all about today's lecture? My voice is gone, so I'll have to save some for the public class today, which you guys are more than invited to. You guys are more than welcome. I'll try to talk about expressions there as well. This is a very, very fun topic. I'm just going to apply that. Okay, so any questions at all? So to recap, be sure to represent thought. Look at eye focus as a tool, as well as the eyebrow or the head tilt, the water in the eyes. These are all different ways for you to, just maximize your flexibility in what you know as movable and actually move it. You won't use your tools until you know what they are. There's cartoony versus realistic expressions and when to use them, and the balance that you need for both. And look at how actors mess with this balance a lot based on movie genres. So look at the difference between a very meditative movie of the human condition versus Avengers, which is very cartoony, very comic book. Expression fundamental is always about subtlety. Try not to go too cartoony too much. You always want that human factor. Cartoony isn't always the choice, because we save that for exactly cartoons. When we go realistic painting, we can't apply cartoony expression on a very realistic face because it'll look uncanny and kind of ridiculous, kind of disingenuous. Then there's the fact that it is uncanny to have a closed gesture with a high energy expression. So the fact that he's leaning forward, really, really angry, his expression, his gesture are all synced. Make sure to sync gesture with expression. That's a very big one I want to remind you guys on. And I want to remind you of the horror factor, so horror movies. When we have any ghouls walking around, anyone scary. Remember Scream? The face is all about the Salvador Dali Scream painting, but the person moves so slowly in their big Black Rider costume. So it's a Salvador Dali painting, right? Was it Alfonso Mucha? I don't know. It's a Salvador Dali. Yeah, it is, right? So when you have a crazy expression on a still body, you have that horror factor. So when you're thinking about the Insidious movies, all the monsters in the Insidious movies moved excruciatingly slow, but they had the most horrifying faces. So the uncanny is also horror. Expression can be very quickly interpreted as horror. And when you're the audience and you're being attacked by something high energy face-wise, but slow body-wise, that's horrifying. And it's something that movie directors use a lot when it comes to horror and anything scary. And then make sure to sync all of this together. If someone is thinking, you're not going to actually make them scratching their head. But a character who is cartoony, yes, they would be scratching their head when they're thinking. But not everybody in real life scratches their head when they're thinking. So remember that there's not a fine line. There's a very defined line between cartoony expression and realistic. And that's it. That's it for today. The steak is overcooked. I read a thing that expressions in painting should be really over the top. Is that just for comics? Absolutely, absolutely. So I did want to talk about one of my latest paintings, which you guys will be getting as a time lapse and a lesson this month. This expression is kind of like she's very content, but she has a lot of thought in her mind. The smile is more to do with the thought that she's thinking has made her smile, or the person she's looking at has made her smile. Hiding half her face has also added to the kind of mystery behind her. So she's more alluring, more beautiful, more sexy kind of an attitude. So that's all subtlety. This is all subtlety. I've allowed the form to take center stage. I haven't worked too hard on the details. The eyes and the eyebrows, which are slightly so raised, and of course the complete smile. And the nose isn't doing much. There is a smile line, but it's very, very subtle, very, very defined stretch of the mouth, and a slight squint in the eyes. Lots of light in the eyes as well to show that there is something. She's either, it's a very tender smile. She's thinking about someone, or she has just seen the person she hasn't seen in a long time. So that's kind of like a yearning is what I was going for. And all of that is executable through subtlety. I haven't actually made her eyebrows go all the way up like a Bollywood singer, or I haven't made her tilt her head too much, or I haven't made her do that really, really cheesy, I'm so sexy kind of face. The sexy features are kind of subtle, kind of indirect. If you're looking for them, you'll find them, not just because audience infers their own emotions or something, or you infer your own emotions, but it's definitely not as neutral as I usually go when it comes to my painting. Sometimes I go fully neutral, which is very boring to me now. So I've been trying to explore expression that is more subtle. So this is an example of what, for the theme of this month, subtlety in expression. Of course, you have to stay subtle. That is only for cartooning when you are using the expressions that are universal emoji expressions. I will think about this while scratching my head. So I'll let you guys go. Good luck with all your homework, and be sure to go over your homework and apply all the changes. And I hope today has kind of revealed to you a lot of what you can do, a lot of the stuff you guys know already. And I can't wait to see what you guys do to your corrections. And I will be assigning the homework for this month shortly, probably before the 5th. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you guys in the Discord. Bye.